Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 15th. Today we're reading together a couple of chapters in Deuteronomy chapter 7 and Deuteronomy chapter 8. Appreciate so much you taking time on this Monday to read along with me. Let me get the text of Deuteronomy 7 and 8 up on the screen for us so we can read along together here. Deuteronomy chapter 7 and Deuteronomy chapter 8. We are in this second, again, by the way different people divided up, the second great speech of Moses, where he is detailing the need for covenant loyalty, the need for careful listening and obeying the commands of Yahweh to his people. And here, specifically in chapter 7, we're going to see how Israel needed to respond to the idolatrous and pagan nations that they were going to face as they were making their way into the promised land. And then once they were in the promised land, and they've been there a while, then there are going to be some questions concerning, well, how did you get here? And what made you successful? And what can help you to continue to be successful? We'll see that in chapter 8. So let's begin reading here in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse number 1. Deuteronomy 7, verse number 1. When Yahweh your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, and he drives out many nations before you, the Hethites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and powerful than you. And when Yahweh your God delivers them over to you and you defeat them, you must completely destroy them. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. You must not intermarry with them, and you must not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons, because they will turn your sons away from me to worship other gods. Then Yahweh's anger will burn against you, and he will swiftly destroy you. Instead, this is what you are to do to them: tear down their altars, smash their sacred pillars, cut down their Asherah poles, and burn their carved images. For you are a holy people, belonging to Yahweh your God. Yahweh your God has chosen you to be his own possession out of all the peoples on the face of the earth. Yahweh had his heart set on you and chose you, not because you were more numerous than all peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples, but because Yahweh loved you and kept the oath he swore to your ancestors. He brought you out with a strong hand and redeemed you from the place of slavery, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know that Yahweh your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps his gracious covenant loyalty for 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandments. But he directly pays back and destroys those who hate him. He will not hesitate to pay back directly the one who hates him. So keep the command, the statutes and ordinances that I'm giving you to follow today. If you listen to and are careful to keep these ordinances, Yahweh your God will keep his covenant loyalty with you, as he swore to your ancestors. He will love you, bless you, and multiply you. He will bless your offspring and the produce of your land, your grain, new wine, and fresh oil, the young of your herds and newborn of your flocks, in the land he swore to your ancestors that he would give you. You will be blessed above all peoples. There will be no infertile male or female among you or your livestock. Yahweh will remove all sickness from you, and he will not put on you the terrible diseases of Egypt that you know about, but he will inflict them on all who hate you. You must destroy all the peoples Yahweh your God is delivering over to you, and not look on them with pity. Do not worship their gods, for that will be a snare to you. If you say to yourself, these nations are greater than I, how can I drive them out? Do not be afraid. Be sure to remember what Yahweh your God did to Pharaoh and all Egypt. The great trials that you saw, the signs and wonders, the strong hand and outstretched arm by which Yahweh your God brought you out. Yahweh your God will do the same to all the peoples you fear. Yahweh your God will also send hornets against them until all the survivors and those hiding from you perish. Don't be terrified of them, for Yahweh your God, a great and awesome God, is among you. Yahweh your God will drive out these nations before you little by little. You will not be able to destroy them all at once. Otherwise, the wild animals will become too numerous for you. Yahweh your God will give them over to you and throw them into great confusion until they are destroyed. He will hand their kings over to you and wipe out their names under heaven. No one will be able to stand against you. You will annihilate them. Burn up the carved images of their gods. Don't covet the silver and gold on the images and take it for yourselves or for yourself, or else you will be ensnared by it, for it is detestable to Yahweh your God. Do not bring any detestable thing into your house, or you will be set apart for destruction like it. You are to abhor and detest it utterly, because it is set apart for destruction. Chapter 8 of Deuteronomy, verse number 1, carefully follow every command I am giving you today, so that you may live and increase and may enter and take possession of the land Yahweh swore to your ancestors. Again, this is Moses speaking. Remember that Yahweh your God led you on the entire journey, these 40 years in the wilderness, so that he might humble you and test you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. Be humble, or he humbled you by letting you go hungry. Then he gave you manna to eat, which you and your ancestors had not known, so that you might learn that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. Your clothing did not wear out, and your feet did not swell these 40 years. Keep in mind that Yahweh your God has been disciplining you just as a man disciplines his son. So keep the commands of Yahweh your God by walking in his ways and fearing him. For Yahweh your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams, springs, and deep water sources, flowing in both valleys and hills, a land of wheat, barley, vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without shortage, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you will find copper. When you eat and are full, you will bless Yahweh your God for the good land he has given you. Be careful not to forget Yahweh your God by failing to keep the commands, ordinances, and statutes that I'm giving you today. When you eat and are full, and build beautiful houses to live in, and your herds and flocks grow, and your silver and gold multiply, and everything else you have increases, be careful that your heart doesn't become proud, and you forget Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. He led you through the great and terrible wilderness with its poisonous snakes and scorpions, a thirsty land where there was no water. He brought you out of the flint rock. He brought water out of the flint rocks for you. He fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your ancestors had not known, in order to humble and test you, so that in the end he might cause you to prosper. You may say to yourself, my power and my own ability have gained this wealth for me. But remember that Yahweh your God gives you the power to gain wealth, in order to confirm his covenant he swore to your ancestors, as it is today. If you ever forget Yahweh your God and follow other gods to serve them and bow in worship to them, I testify against you today that you will certainly perish. Like the nations Yahweh is about to destroy before you, you will perish if you do not obey Yahweh your God. And that is Deuteronomy chapter 7 and Deuteronomy chapter 8. Deuteronomy 7 presents a pretty polarizing subject matter. The issue of the holy war is going to be discussed later on in chapter 20 as well. The fact that as the Israelites entered into the land and faced the Hethites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, and others, that their responsibility was to completely destroy these nations, to commit what is the Hebrew word is herem, to commit herem, total destruction, not making treaties, showing no mercy, not intermarrying with them. Don't do this, not on racial or ethnic lines. That's not the issue here. No, the issue, without a doubt, is the fact that there would be religious corruption that would take place by either allowing these nations to continue to be in the land, or by especially intermarrying with these nations. Doing that would pollute the religiosity of Israel, and that couldn't happen. That was not to happen. These first 4 verses here lay this down. You don't interact with them, complete destruction. And if you don't, then God will do to you what you should have done to them. Go in, tear down their altars, smash their sacred pillars, cut down their Asherah poles, burn their carved images, for you are a holy people belonging to Yahweh your God. Out of all the nations of the earth, he chose you. You have a very special position as Yahweh's special people. But don't get it twisted. He didn't choose you because you were great, because you're a great number or anything of that nature. No. He chose you simply because he loved you. And the love was based upon the promise that he made to Abraham. Kind of the whole idea of God is love. That's basically it. Because God loved you, by his sovereign will and by his grace, he chose you to be his people. He made promises to Abraham. So know then that he is committed to you, that he will show covenant loyalty. We've talked about that on a number of occasions, the need for the people to show covenant loyalty. Well, here Moses is stressing the fact that God will show covenant loyalty even to 1,000 generations. I heard somebody earlier talk about the number of generations from Moses to us right now. If the math's right, and if a generation is like 25 years or so, then there have been 125 generations from Moses to now, or so, something like that. And yet here the language is 1,000 generations. I don't want to say hyperbole, but the incredible number that is mentioned here shows us the long-reaching effects of God's loyalty. God is loyal, but here's the thing: he's also just. He will destroy those who hate him. He will not hesitate to pay back directly those who hate him. So again, keep the commands, the statutes, the ordinances that Moses says, I'm giving you today. And if you do that, if you will listen, if you will keep the ordinances, if you yourself will be loyal, then God will love you, and he will bless you, and he will multiply you. So the formula then is you need to know God, know his statutes and ordinances. Then you need to keep them, be obedient to him, and in doing so, then you'll be blessed in everything that you do. Now, something very interesting that I noted in one of my resources here, this is Daniel Block's commentary in the NIV application commentary. Beginning of verse 13, I'm just going to read to you straight from his writing here, that what Moses is doing here in this text is very purposeful. What he mentions and the words that he uses are purposeful to basically stab at the Canaanite gods that are within the land. So all the expressions this is reading from, again, the NIV application commentary written by Daniel Block. This is page 213. All the expressions in verse 13b are linked with the Canaanite pantheon. Dagon, which is translated grain, recalls Dagon, later the primary god of the Philistines, though worship of this deity was widespread among the Canaanites. For wine, Moses substitutes the common word yayin with tyros, which is cognate to the name of the god Tershu or Tirosh, attested in the El Armana letters and in Ugaritic text. So these words he's using are very closely associated with the names of the gods of the peoples that they're going in to face off against. For olive oil, Moses substitutes the common word semin with yishar, from a root meaning shiny. Some speculate that Yishar is the name of the god of olive oil. The rare expression for calves of your herds, literally the increase of your cattle, occurs elsewhere only in chapter 28 and in Exodus 13, replacing the more common Igel. This word seems to be linked to the name of the deity Shagar or Shigar, whose veneration has been attested in Ugaritic, Imar, Der Allah, and Punic text. However, the mythological connection is most transparent in the designation for lambs of your flocks, which substitutes for the more common Kebes or Keseb, the veneration of Ishtar or Ashtarti, the goddess of fertility, was among the most widespread of any divinity in the ancient Near East. Moses's preference for these rare expressions seems a deliberate stab at the jugular of Canaanite religion. In the land that Yahweh promised on oath to the ancestors, he alone guarantees fertility of crops and herds. The pastor of Israel, referring to Moses, ends this promise of blessing in verse 14 with a final comprehensive promise. God will be blessed, or excuse me, Israel will be blessed more than all the peoples. So here there is an acknowledgement of these gods that they serve. And Moses is using these specific words, some of them rare terms, not using normal terms, seemingly to take a direct shot at these gods, saying, you think they give you these things? Not at all. It is Yahweh alone who truly gives you these things. Do not go after these gods. By the way, we mentioned earlier that whenever they went in, they were supposed to tear down the altars, the sacred pillars, the Asherah poles, and the carved images. You know, the gods that these things are supposed to represent, why don't they stop you if they're so powerful? Well, they can't. So why worship them? These gods that supposedly give you all these things, why worship them? They don't give you these things. God does. Yahweh alone does. So therefore, serve him and commit yourselves to him and him alone. And really all of this about this destruction, this holy war, all this gets back to the need to not worship their gods, because they will be a snare to you. But God, what these nations are mighty, they're strong. How do we know that we can defeat them? Well, God says, I've got this. Don't forget Egypt. With my strong hand, I delivered you, and I will do that. I will do that here as well. Yahweh, your God, will give them over to you and throw them into great confusion until they are destroyed. He will hand their kings over to you. But make sure, again, don't desire the wealth of the pagans. Don't desire their gold images or anything like that. Don't become ensnared by them. Resist them. Separate yourselves from them. Destroy them. And commit yourself to Yahweh alone. That's chapter 7. And once you've been in land for a little bit, chapter 8. Once you've been there for a while, there's going to be temptation there as well. And there's been temptation all along the way. In Egypt, or in the wilderness, it is revealed to us here that Yahweh purposefully presented difficulties before the people in order to test them, so that everybody would know what's in their hearts. This would reveal Israel's true character. When things got tough, how would they respond? Would they lean more into their dependence on Yahweh, or would they begin to grumble and complain against Yahweh? We know the answer for the first generation. They didn't do very well, and hopefully the second generation will do a lot better. But it really gets down to the fact that this well-known quote by Jesus himself is that they needed to learn that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh, that he supplies everything, not just physical nourishment, but spiritual nourishment as well. But speaking about what is physically needed, hey, did you notice that your clothes didn't wear out and your feet didn't swell for those 40 years? Who did that for you? God did that for them. God gave them these blessings. And it is God, it is Yahweh, your God, who is bringing you into this good land, this land that is overflowing with all these tremendous things in verses 7 through 9. Now, when you get there and you are experiencing these blessings, you need to bless Yahweh. You need to bless him for the good land he's given you. Not bless him as if a superior to an inferior, but bless him as in speak well of him and thank him for what he has given you. But be careful to make sure that you don't forget his commands. Be careful to make sure that you do not become prideful. Don't begin thinking that you made all this happen, because Israel, you didn't. It is Yahweh alone who has made all of this possible. Don't get proud. Don't begin thinking that my power and my own ability have gained this wealth for me. No. You need to remember that it was God and God alone who has blessed you. Remember, you were nothing. You were slaves. You were destined for failure. But God delivered you. God brought you through the sea. God, by his sovereignty, entered into this covenant with you. And now it is by his will that you would come into this land, that you would wage this holy and just war, because they're fighting against pagans. They're fighting against idolaters. They're fighting against those who have rejected Yahweh. for that sin, they deserve death. And Yahweh is able to instruct the Israelites to do such a thing. But once you've had that success, don't ever begin to think that you did that, because you did not. Yahweh says, I did. So do not get too big for your britches. Do not become prideful, but continually bless Yahweh your God for the good things he has done for you. So two main points here then within chapter 7 and 8. Number one, resist idolatry. Don't put confidence in idols. They are nothing. Number two, resist pride. Don't have confidence in yourself, because you are nothing. In everything, Yahweh is the one who provides. In every way, Yahweh is the one who has accomplished good things in their lives. And same thing is true for us. God is the one who is accomplishing good things in our lives, and certainly to him belongs alone the honor, praise, and glory. May we resist pride and always find ourselves thankful to God and blessing him every chance that we get, speaking well of him every chance that we get. I appreciate so much you tuning into this reading on this Monday morning. If you have any questions about this text, I know I sped through that pretty quickly. Please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. I'd love to have a further discussion with you if you would like. We'll be back at it again tomorrow. I believe we're just in chapter 9 tomorrow. Yep. Tomorrow we will, again, this leads into what we see at the end of chapter 8 about the pride, and leads into the discussion of what we're going to see in chapter 9 as well. Again, looking forward to reading that along with you tomorrow. Again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Monday, everyone. Take care. God bless.